When we talk about history, we often focus on the civilizations of Europe, Asia, and Africa, places like Rome, China, and Egypt. These regions left behind writings, monuments, and massive empires that shaped the world. But there's a vast chapter of human history that many people know little about: the story of the Americas before Columbus arrived in 1492. What was happening in North, Central, and South America before Europeans made contact? Were there cities, empires, writing systems, religion? In this documentary, we'll explore exactly that. We'll go back more than 15,000 years to uncover the real history of the Americas. From the first people who arrived across the ice, to the rise of powerful civilizations, and the knowledge that was nearly lost forever. And we will also look at what was happening in the Americas during the time when Jesus Christ walked the earth. What cultures existed, what they believed, and how they lived in total isolation from the old world. The earliest humans arrived in the Americas during the last ice age. Most scientists agree they came from Northeast Asia and crossed a land bridge that once connected Siberia to Alaska. This area is known as Beringia. Because sea levels were lower during the Ice Age, large amounts of land were exposed. People walked or traveled along coastlines, following herds of animals like mammoths and caribou. They were hunter-gatherers who moved in small bands and relied on natural resources to survive. These migrations likely happened in waves over thousands of years. Some people settled in what is now Alaska and Canada, while others moved further south. Archaeological evidence shows that by 14,000 years ago, people were living as far south as Chile in South America. These early populations developed unique cultures. They adapted to different environments, from deserts to jungles to mountains. Even though they had no written language, they passed on knowledge through oral storytelling, rituals, and craftsmanship. One of the most important changes in early American history was the development of agriculture. In what is now Mexico, ancient people began to domesticate a wild grass called teosinte, eventually turning it into what we now call maize or corn. This process took centuries. Maize became the foundation of the diet in Mesoamerica, just like wheat in Europe or rice in Asia. Along with maize, they also farmed beans, squash, chili peppers, and avocados. In South America, people cultivated potatoes and quinoa in the Andes Mountains. These crops allowed people to settle in one place, store food, and grow larger communities. As farming became more reliable, societies began to organize. They built irrigation systems, developed trade networks, and created social hierarchies. Religious practices also became more structured, often tied to the cycles of planting and harvesting. It's important to understand that agriculture wasn't just about food. It laid the foundation for complex civilizations. It allowed people to build cities, support priests and rulers, and create temples and monuments. One of the earliest known civilizations in the Americas was the Olmec, which emerged around 1500 BC in what is now southern Mexico. The Olmecs are famous for their colossal stone heads carved from basalt, some of which weigh over 20 tons. These heads likely represent rulers or important figures. The Olmecs also built ceremonial centers, developed calendars, and may have created one of the earliest writing systems in the Americas. They didn't leave behind large cities like Rome or Babylon, but they had a huge cultural impact. Later civilizations, like the Maya and the Aztec, borrowed many ideas from the Olmecs, such as ritual ball games, religious symbols, and calendar systems. Another early civilization was the Zapotec, who built Monte Alban, one of the first cities in Mesoamerica. Built high on a mountain, it had temples, tombs, and a central plaza. The Zapotec developed a form of writing and recorded their history through carved glyphs. These civilizations show that long before contact with Europe, people in the Americas had complex societies with religion, politics, technology, and trade. Around the time Jesus Christ lived in the Middle East, roughly from 4 BC to 30 AD, the Americas were thriving with their own civilizations, completely isolated from the events in Rome, Judea, or Egypt. In Mesoamerica, the Maya were entering their pre-classic period, a time when they began building large ceremonial centers. They had developed early forms of their writing system and had started tracking time with complex calendars. Farther north, cultures in what is now the American Midwest were building massive earthworks. The Hopewell culture, 200 BC to 500 AD, constructed large ceremonial mounds, some aligned with astronomical events. These communities traded across long distances, from the Great Lakes to the Gulf Coast. In the Andes Mountains, the ancestors of the Inca were already mastering agriculture on terraced hillsides. Though the Inca Empire wouldn't rise until over 1,000 years later, earlier cultures like the Nazca and Moche were active. The Nazca created massive geoglyphs, known today as the Nazca Lines, etched into desert ground. These drawings were so large, they could only be fully seen from above. Religion in the Americas during this time was deeply spiritual and based on nature, ancestors, and cosmic forces. Although the concept of monotheism didn't exist in these cultures, their belief systems were sophisticated and tied closely to astronomy, seasonal cycles, and agricultural rituals. So while Jesus was preaching in Galilee and the Roman Empire ruled across Europe and the Mediterranean, the peoples of the Americas were writing in glyphs, building cities, carving stone monuments, and tracking the heavens in their own way, with no knowledge that the other even existed. When we imagine ancient cities in the Americas, we often think of the pyramids of Mexico or the jungles of the Maya. But one of the most impressive urban centers was actually in what is now the United States, the city of Cahokia. Located near modern-day St. Louis, Cahokia was home to tens of thousands of people by the year 1100 AD. It featured massive earthen mounds, including Monk's Mound, which stood over 100 feet tall and covered more area than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Surrounding Monk's Mound were ceremonial plazas, wooden temples, homes, and a complex society with elite leaders, religious rituals, and a deep understanding of astronomy. The city was connected to vast trade networks that reached the Atlantic coast and the Rocky Mountains. Yet, Cahokia disappeared mysteriously before European contact. Historians and archaeologists continue to investigate why this city declined, possibly due to climate shifts, resource depletion, or internal conflict. One of the most fascinating aspects of pre-Columbian civilizations was their spiritual and scientific understanding of the world. Though they had no telescopes or advanced machinery, many cultures in the Americas developed sophisticated calendars, star charts, and architectural alignments with celestial bodies. The Maya, for instance, tracked the movements of Venus, solar eclipses, and equinoxes with incredible precision. Their observatories, such as El Caracol at Chichen Itza, were aligned to key astronomical events. In the Andes, the Inca built the city of Machu Picchu in perfect harmony with mountain peaks and sun cycles. They use an instrument called the Intihuatana, often referred to as a hitching post of the sun, to mark solstices and seasonal changes. These spiritual practices were not separate from science. In fact, for many ancient American cultures, religion and science were deeply intertwined. Understanding the stars meant understanding the will of the gods, the timing of crops, and the destiny of rulers. In 1492, Christopher Columbus made contact with the Americas. What followed was one of the most dramatic cultural collisions in history. European colonization brought new technologies, religions, and systems of government, but it also brought diseases, warfare, and devastation. Within a century, over 90% of the indigenous population of the Americas had perished. Entire cities were abandoned. Libraries and codices were burned. Languages, traditions, and stories disappeared. The Spanish conquest of the Aztec and Inca empires erased centuries of progress and culture. Priests destroyed Maya texts, labeling them pagan. Temples were torn down and replaced by churches, yet not everything was lost. Oral histories survived. Sacred sites remained hidden in the jungle or high in the mountains. And today, descendants of these ancient civilizations continue to protect and revive their heritage. The history of the Americas before 1492 is not a story of silence. It is a story of voices we're only just beginning to hear again. From the icy lands of Alaska to the rainforests of Brazil, from the towering Andes to the plains of the Midwest, the first Americans built civilizations of incredible depth, beauty, and wisdom. Their story matters, and by uncovering it, we rediscover a piece of ourselves, a shared human past that stretches far beyond what we were ever taught.